We continue with the power of storytelling. Now, since I interact very closely with people, of course, at book signings, seminars, and camps, I always want to gather data from people because this is a very important aspect at this point. In other words, which parts of what you shared did they understand well, which ones touched their lives, and which ones did not? Because ultimately, if you want to touch people's lives even more, you need to analyze this point well. Believe me, the vast majority of people always come with a story. They say, this story changed my life, or this story affected me deeply. At our last camp, there was a gentleman. He said, the eagle story I read in your book changed my life as well. Let me remind you which story this is, by the way. Then I also understood how it was connected to his life. Now, this is a story whose accuracy hasn't been 100% proven, but what it wants to convey gives us great lessons. Eagles are among the longest living bird species. There are eagles that live for nearly 70 years. However, in order to reach this advanced age, when they turn 40, they have to make a very difficult and important decision. When the eagle turns 40, its talons harden and lose their flexibility. Because of this, it can no longer grasp its prey and becomes unable to feed itself. Its beak grows longer and curves towards its chest. Its feathers thicken and start to get in the way of its wings. Even flying becomes extremely difficult for it. Therefore, the eagle has come to a time when it must make a choice. It will either accept the changes it is experiencing and give up, in other words, choose death, or it will endure the painful and challenging process of rebirth. The process of rebirth takes about 150 days. An eagle that chooses to be reborn flies to the top of a mountain and settles on a rocky ledge. Then it starts striking its beak against the rock with all its might. It continues until its beak breaks off and falls away. Afterwards, in pain, it waits for a new beak to grow. Once the new beak has grown, it pulls out its talons and waits for new ones to grow in their place. Then it plucks out its feathers. After 5 months, the eagle becomes ready for its rebirth flight, which grants it another 20 years or more of life. This process, which seems extremely painful for the eagle, actually adds years to its life. And it achieves this transformation, which seems impossible for itself, solely by trusting its instincts. Every pain is pregnant with a rebirth. The Creator never confronts his servant with a problem for which he has not provided a solution. And every pain has benefits that we do not know or cannot see. Now look, what did we do here? We could have said this as well. Here you can recreate yourself, your new version. That could happen, this could happen, but you have to endure the pain. But we conveyed this through a story. What does a story do? It allows us to visualize it in our minds. When we visualize it, we enter into the story. It has a flow, an introduction, a development, and a conclusion. And he said, look, don't forget, I'm talking about a simple story. He said, it changed my life. And today he has grown his business, made significant progress, and says he now has more than 200 employees. And it's all because of a story. Please recognize the power of stories. One day a mayor heard about me from a friend of ours. Absolutely, well, he said, I want to do a project with you, like a coaching session. Anyway, I listened to him for a bit, and I realized something. There is an incredible ambition inside him. And he's constantly chasing after being better, reaching a higher version of himself, getting to this level, getting to that level. But he's not even aware of where that's going to take him. This is a very important thing. I mean, are you doing something because you love it? Or are you doing it to be valued, to stay busy or whatever? Are you doing it so that people in society will respect you? If you're not doing it because you love it, but for others, yes, you might be successful, but you won't be happy. So I told him this story, a story about Naizen Tevfik. I said one day Naizen Tevfik attends a funeral ceremony. Naizen Tevfik's way of dressing is a bit, well, unusual. He dresses like a vagabond, you know. His clothes are torn, his hair is messy. So he's standing right at the front row because of a friend. And in the front row, all the important people of the time are standing there. There's a member of parliament, for example, and so on. Right next to him, a mayor ends up standing, next to Naizen Tevfik. He looks at Naizen Tevfik like this. Of course, he's all dressed up in grand toilette. A suit and everything. Who are you? He says in a condescending way. Nazan Tevfik looks at him and just says nothing. And the guy laughs and all that, because to him it's a completely worthless matter. But he's a mayor after all. Anyway, Nazan Tevfik is of course aware that he's being mocked. Then he says, well, who are you? He says, I am the mayor of such and such a place. Well, what do you plan to become after that? He asks. I don't know. He says, maybe I could become a member of parliament after that. Then he says, I could become a minister. Then prime minister, then president, and then nothing, he says. Nazan Tevfik says, well, I am currently in that position you aspire to reach in the future. It's a very meaningful story. Now, that's what I just told. Because, in fact, what he did was entirely driven by an ambition to make up for some of his shortcomings. Even if he gets there, he won't be happy. He's not aware of this. He doesn't enjoy the journey. He thinks the destination will bring happiness. But it's never like that. It's always the journey itself that's beautiful, not the destination. Now, as you can see, if I were to tell him, you are ambitious, what you're looking for isn't there, it's not here, he would immediately object and defend his position. But even when I tell him Nazan Tevfik's story, he might not immediately agree with me after hearing it. But that story will stay with him. He'll think about it on the road. He'll think about it when he gets there. And afterwards, he really had a very warm conversation with me. He said, at first I couldn't see it from that perspective, but now I really agree with you. And we still keep in touch and have conversations. Here's another story. I do this a lot with business people. I do it with businesswomen, with businessmen. Yes, being successful is a nice thing. Being busy is a good thing, but what you do it for is very important. Respect, if you're doing it just to get respect, just to be valuable, to be enough, or out of greed for money, these things consume and destroy you. That's also a famous story. There was a fisherman taking a nap in his small boat. He had pulled up to the shore. Gentle waves were lapping against the boat. He had placed his hat over his face, and he was enjoying a pleasant siesta. He was taking a midday nap. A businessman had come to that town for a 2 or 3 day vacation. He immediately started observing everything. He thinks, if I buy land here, I wonder if it will increase in value. He can't even enjoy his vacation. Even there, he's thinking about work. He wonders, will this place be zoned for development? Will it be like this or that? And so on. He asks, how is the fishing business here? As he's thinking about all this, he comes across our fisherman. A conversation starts between them. He asks, so what do you do? He says, in the mornings I go fishing. I get up before sunrise. Then I bring in the fish I catch. Around 9 or 10 o'clock I sell them on the shore. I make my daily earnings. I take a nap at noon, and in the evenings I chat, relax, enjoy myself, and spend time with my family, he says. Our businessman says, well, actually, if you went out again in the afternoon, normalized, false. You could catch a few more fish then. You could sell them in the evening too. You'd increase your income. When you increase your income, he says, instead of this small boat, you can buy a slightly bigger one. He says, with that, this time you can cast nets, he says. You can sell even more. When you earn from that, you can buy a big boat, and so on, he says. Ours is listening to all this, of course. Yes, and what else, he says. He smiles slightly, but our businessman doesn't notice. He's still excited. You'd do this, you'd do that, and so on. Then you'd have ships, you'd have boats. You'd have others work those boats for you, and so on and so on. And if you work steadily, he says, after 15 to 20 years you can retire. Then he says you can go fishing in the morning just for pleasure. And in the afternoon until evening, he says you can just enjoy yourself. The fisherman turns around like this. He says, I'm already doing exactly what you just described. So actually, how much now? A story full of awareness. People get so caught up in ambition. They can't even realize that the fisherman is living a life of pleasure. Because for him, it's always about how much money you make. That's what matters to you. How much work you do. How much of this or that you have. That's what's valuable. It's been ingrained in him so much that he can't perceive anything else. This man is living his life here. And you come here, even with all your money, you can't even live that life. Your mind is still stuck on things like Should I buy some land here? Should I invest in real estate here? That's what you're thinking about. So I told them this story too. And I also do this a little bit myself. I adapt it to his life story as well. For example, if the person is in the finance sector, I give examples based on finance. Like if we evaluated this here, if we did that thing, you know what I mean? If he has another factory, if he's in the automotive sector, I give examples accordingly and so on, so that he can find himself more in the story. But then we stay a bit silent for a while. That one story adds so much more meaning than 100 plain sentences I could give. You should tell good stories. You should have more stories in your bag than technical knowledge. For example, work on telling these stories. For example, flaws. When it comes to flaws, there is this bottomless pit called comparison. People constantly compare themselves to others and think they're not good enough. They say, that person has this quality, this one has that quality, I can't do this, so that's why. But I say this, your flaw is your uniqueness. Your flaw is your signature. A flaw is not your deficiency. I always tell them the story of the 2 buckets. There was a man, every day he would go to the riverside. He would fill 2 buckets with water and bring them home. One bucket would arrive completely full of water, while the other would arrive only half full. The buckets would talk among themselves. The bucket that was half full would always say, "See, I am incomplete, I am flawed. You carry all the water to the end, but every time my water is only half by the time we arrive. I'm just not whole, I'm not complete," and so on and so forth. Then one day the person carrying the water says, "Look," he says, "you think that way because you compare yourself to the other." He says, "Now look at the road." They look at the road. Now, while carrying its water, because that bucket has a hole, the water spills out as it's being carried. Where that water spilled, there are flowers, grass, and butterflies have come. Life has sprung up there, but the path the other one walked is completely dry. He says, "Look, while you saw it as a flaw, you actually gave something to people, gave something to animals. You nourished nature," he says. Sometimes the things we think are flaws in ourselves might actually be the aspects that inspire others. They might be what others find truly beautiful in us. They might be what allows others to connect with us. That's why we should say this. Of course, I will work on improving myself, but all of us have certain flaws. We will make peace with these flaws. We will see them as our own privilege, our unique trait. When we see them this way, it will take on a completely different expression. It will gain a whole new meaning. As you can see, it's a story. Once again, it has taken us to a completely different point. It happened again recently. A lady came up to me. She said, "My life," she said, "the story in your book, if your heart is pure, the story ends happily." She said, "The peach hunter story changed my life." I have to admit, I didn't remember the whole story. I mean, how exactly did it go? You know the story and all. But think about it. Even though I can't remember the whole story right now, she said it changed her life. That's how powerful stories are. Stories can make such a big difference in people's lives. Multiply your stories. The stories you will tell. Now, knowing these stories is just one part of it. We will have a lesson called Channels of Communication. In the Channels of Communication lesson, I will also talk a bit about the techniques we will use in storytelling. But learn a new story every day. While learning that story, think, in which lesson can I use this? Consider this together and try to come up with a similar example from your own life for that story. Then you will see that you can reach people very easily. You will reach people's hearts. And that's when, instead of a cold life coaching approach, you will have a bond that you build with people from heart to heart, a warm connection. For example, do you know where the word tanishmak, to meet, comes from in our language? To become acquainted. To become acquainted is not the meeting of minds, it is the meeting of hearts. So when we apply both the topics we discussed in our previous lessons and what I am explaining now, that's when we truly become acquainted. That's when a completely different point awakens. That's when we reach a completely different point. We say, "Come, let us become acquainted, friends." Just like in Yunus Emre's poem,